The call came in just after midnight. No number, no location. The screen showed one thing instead: my name. I thought it was a system glitch, and then the man on the line said something that made me stop breathing. He told me this call wasn't for him, it was for me. Night shift always starts the same way, no matter how many times you tell yourself this one will be different. The lights in the emergency dispatch room are never fully on, just dim enough that the corners stay soft and uncertain, just bright enough that the screens burn a pale reflection into your eyes if you stare too long. Fluorescent panels hum above the ceiling tiles, a low, steady vibration that blends with the air conditioning until you stop hearing it consciously, like the sound of blood in your ears when the room goes quiet. There are 6 stations in the room, arranged in a shallow arc facing the wall of monitors. But after midnight, only 2 are staffed. Mine, and another one across the room that belongs to a woman named Karen, who has been here longer than most of the supervisors and talks only when she absolutely has to. Between us are empty chairs, pushed in neatly, their headsets hanging like abandoned headphones at a bus station after the last route has run. I clocked in at 11:47 p.m., 3 minutes early, because I always do. Graveyard shift trains you to arrive early, not because anyone asks you to, but because standing outside the room for those extra minutes gives you time to adjust your breathing, to slow your thoughts down, to prepare for the fact that for the next 8 hours, you are going to be the first voice people hear on what might be the worst night of their lives. The system boots automatically when you log in. The screens flicker once, twice, then settle into their familiar layout. Call queue on the left, unit status in the center, map interface on the right. Everything green, everything quiet. That quiet never lasts. It's not a peaceful quiet, not the kind you get at home when the house is asleep. It's a held breath, a pause before impact. You learn to recognize the difference after your first few weeks. The room itself feels awake even when nothing is happening, like it's waiting for something to go wrong. I adjusted my headset, took a sip of coffee that had been reheated too many times to still taste like anything, and glanced at the clock in the corner of my screen. 12:03 a.m. Officially the new day, though it never feels like one. Karen didn't look up from her station. She never does. We both know the rhythm of these hours. The first call usually comes within 5 minutes of midnight. Sometimes it's a drunk driver reported by someone who can't remember the license plate. Sometimes it's a domestic disturbance that's been building all evening and finally tips over. Sometimes it's nothing serious at all, someone calling because they heard a noise and don't know who else to ask. The point is, the first call is almost always ordinary. That's how the night eases you in. The ringtone cut through the hum without warning, sharp and immediate, and my hand moved to the console before I consciously decided to answer. 911, what's your emergency? My voice sounded steady in my own ears, practiced neutral, the way they train you to sound. The line was silent, not disconnected silence, not static, just open air. I waited, watching the call timer tick upward in red numbers. 1 second, 2, 3. This happens sometimes. Pocket dials, open lines, people who panic and freeze the moment someone picks up. 911, can you hear me? I said again, keeping my tone calm. Still nothing. I glanced at the caller information panel, expecting to see an unknown number or a blocked line. Instead, the field was filled. Caller ID private, location unavailable. That wasn't unusual. The part that made my fingers pause on the keyboard was the name field. Dispatch software pulls names when it can, mostly for landlines or registered VoIP accounts. Cell phones rarely show anything useful. This one showed a name. My name. exactly as it appears in the system. Last name, comma, first name. I stared at it longer than I should have, long enough that the call timer reached 12 seconds. I told myself it was a glitch. Database errors happen. Names get cached incorrectly. I'd seen stranger things in the system before, but none of them had been my own. Hello? The voice came through suddenly, quiet but clear, like the caller had been waiting for the right moment to speak. Male, adult, calm, too calm. Yes, I'm here, I said, forcing myself back into protocol. What's your emergency? There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. Then he said, I think something's wrong with the line. Can you tell me what's happening? I asked. Are you in danger right now? Another pause. I watched the waveform monitor spike slightly with his breathing. I don't know, he said. That's why I called. Okay, I said, fingers hovering over the incident type menu. Where are you calling from? I'm not sure how to answer that, he replied. My jaw tightened. Sir, do you know your address? Yes, he said, but I don't think it's useful. Why not? I asked. He exhaled slowly, like he was choosing his words carefully. Because it's not where I am. I leaned back in my chair a fraction, eyes flicking to the map screen. Are you somewhere else right now? I think so, he said. Or maybe I'm where I'm supposed to be, and the problem is that you aren't. That was the moment I felt the shift. Not fear exactly, more like the sense you get when a conversation stops following the expected shape. Dispatchers rely on patterns. People in emergencies behave in predictable ways, even when they're panicking. This man wasn't panicking. He was speaking like he had all the time in the world. Sir, I said, keeping my voice even, I need you to tell me your location so I can send help. You can't, he said almost gently. You already know that. I glanced again at the name field. It still displayed my name. Why do you say that? I asked. He hesitated, then said, because this call isn't for me. My stomach tightened. Then who is it for? There was a faint sound on the line then. Not static, not interference. A soft clicking noise like a mouse button being pressed somewhere far away. It's for you, he said. I felt a sudden irrational urge to take off my headset, as if that would put physical distance between me and his voice. Instead, I straightened in my chair. Sir, this is an emergency line, I said. If this is a prank call, it's not, he interrupted, still calm. I wouldn't waste what little time you have left. The call timer ticked past 1 minute. I could feel Karen's presence across the room without looking at her, the way you sense someone else in a dark space. I resisted the urge to wave her over. What time do you think it is? I asked him. It's just after midnight, he said. Same as you. My breath caught for a split second before I controlled it. How do you know that? Because I can hear the room, he replied. The lights, the air system, the way your chair creaks when you lean back. I froze. My chair had made a soft sound when I shifted my weight seconds earlier. You're guessing, I said. You can't hear that. I can, he said. That's the problem. My fingers moved automatically, flagging the call for supervisor review, even as my mind struggled to keep up. Sir, I said, are you in the same building as me right now? He laughed quietly, not amused, more like resigned. No, he said, not anymore. What does that mean? I asked. The line went quiet again. I watched the seconds climb, my pulse loud in my ears. Just as I was about to repeat the question, he spoke. This line shouldn't exist, he said, and neither should I. What happened to you? I asked, surprising myself with how much I wanted an answer. I did my job, he said. I stayed on the call. I followed procedure. A chill crept up my spine. What job? I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower, closer. The same one you're doing now. My mouth went dry. That's not possible, I said. You don't know who I am. I know exactly who you are, he replied. That's why I called. The system chimed softly, a notification in the corner of my screen. Call status update. I glanced at it without breaking eye contact with the empty air in front of me. Status ended. The line was still open. I could still hear his breathing. Sir, I said, my voice tight now despite my efforts. The system says this call has ended. I know, he said. That's how it starts. What start? I asked. He exhaled slowly. The part where no one believes you, he said. Where the logs don't match what you remember. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I didn't listen, he said. And you still can. I shook my head slightly as if to clear it. Listen to what? I asked. The line crackled faintly, then steadied. When the next call comes in, he said, don't answer it. My screen flashed then, the familiar alert tone slicing through the air as a new call hit the queue. Line 2, ringing. I stared at it, my hand hovering inches above the console. What happens if I don't? I asked quietly. His voice was almost a whisper now. You stay where you are, he said. You don't end up on this side of the line. The ringing grew louder, more insistent. I swallowed. And if I do answer? There was a pause, long, heavy. Then he said, then you'll understand why I used your name. The call went dead, this time for real. The waveform flattened. The timer froze. The name field cleared. The system reset as if nothing unusual had happened. Line 2 was still ringing. Across the room, Karen finally looked up, eyebrows raised slightly in silent question. I looked at the clock. 12:07 a.m., 4 minutes into the new day. My hand hovered over the answer button as the room hummed around me. Unchanged, indifferent, waiting. I answered the next call. Of course I did. Anyone who says they wouldn't is lying to themselves. You don't survive long in this job by ignoring a ringing line, no matter how strange the last one was. Training takes over. Muscle memory. The call connected instantly, and a woman's voice filled my headset, frantic, breathless, real. A car accident on the interstate. Mile marker numbers that made sense. Screaming in the background. I dispatched units, followed protocol, stayed on the line until help arrived. The whole time, a part of my mind stayed locked on what had just happened, replaying it in fragments, looking for a crack I could explain away. When the call ended, my hands were shaking just enough that I had to rest them flat on the desk. Across the room, Karen was back to staring at her screens, already absorbed in something else. The room hadn't changed. That bothered me more than anything. If something impossible had just happened, shouldn't the world acknowledge it somehow? A flicker in the lights? A system alert? Anything. Instead, everything looked exactly as it always did. That's when I checked the log. Every call that comes through the system is recorded automatically. Timestamps, durations, routing paths, audio files. Even calls that drop or disconnect leave behind a footprint. That's what they teach you during training, what they repeat every time there's an audit or a legal review. The system remembers even when you don't. I pulled up my activity panel and scrolled back to 12:03 a.m. The accident call was there. So were the routine ones before it. But the call I was looking for wasn't. There was no record of it at all. No incoming line, no duration, no audio file, nothing between 12:01 and 12:06. 5 minutes of my shift simply didn't exist. I refreshed the screen. Same result. I logged out and back in. Still nothing. A thin layer of unease settled in my chest. Calls vanish sometimes, but not like that. Not cleanly. Usually there's an error code, a partial entry, something corrupted you can point to and say, there, that's where it broke. This was absence, deliberate. I flagged the time range for review and pulled up the raw system logs, a level most dispatchers never touch unless something has gone very wrong. The entries scrolled by in dense lines of text, server pings, line checks, automatic health reports, everything normal, everything boring. At 12:00:58, the system registered an inbound signal. At 12:03 it logged a termination. 2 seconds, no audio, no metadata. Just a start and an end, back to back. I stared at the timestamps, my mouth dry. I knew I'd been on that call for over a minute. I could still hear the man's voice in my head, calm and precise. 2 seconds wasn't even long enough for the line to ring. My chair creaked softly as I leaned forward, and the sound made my skin prickle. I remembered what he'd said about hearing the room. I shook the thought away and checked the routing path. The call hadn't come in through the usual channels. It wasn't a cellular signal or a landline. It was tagged as internal. That made no sense. Internal lines are used for testing, for supervisors, for system diagnostics. They don't ring out to the public. They definitely don't display caller names. And they don't route to individual dispatchers without manual assignment. I glanced up at the wall clock, 12:19 a.m. Only 12 minutes had passed, but it felt longer. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. I told myself to call a supervisor. That's what you're supposed to do when something unusual happens. That's what the handbook says. But another part of me hesitated, not because I was afraid of looking foolish, but because of what the man had said, the part where no one believes you. I opened the audio archive anyway and searched for my own name. It returned hundreds of results, all of them mundane. Training calls, recorded quality checks. Nothing from tonight. I was halfway through convincing myself I'd imagined the entire thing when the system chimed again. Not a call this time, a notification. Incoming transfer request. I frowned. Transfers usually come from field units or neighboring dispatch centers, not out of nowhere. The request didn't list a source, it just listed a destination. Me. I hesitated before accepting it. My heart was beating faster now, loud enough that I could feel it in my throat. The line connected with a soft click. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a familiar sound filled my ears. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. "You didn't listen," the man said. My stomach dropped. "How are you back on this line?" I demanded, my voice sharper than before. "There's no record of you." "I know," he said. "That's the point." "This is an internal channel," I said. "You shouldn't be able to access it." "Neither should you," he replied. "But you do every night." I swallowed. "What do you want?" "I want you to look at the log again," he said. "The part you skipped." "I didn't skip anything," I said. "You skipped yourself," he replied. "Check your user history." My pulse thudded in my ears as I pulled up the requested panel. User activity history. It tracked logins, logouts, actions taken by each dispatcher. Mine stretched back years. I scrolled down to tonight. My breath caught. There was an entry I didn't recognize. 12:04 a.m. User action. Call transfer initiated. Source unknown. Destination self. "I didn't do that," I said aloud, though no one else was listening. "You will," he said quietly. "You already have." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Time doesn't work like that." He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something I hadn't heard before. Weariness. "It does here," he said. "On this side of the console." I rubbed my forehead with my free hand, trying to think. You said you did your job, I said. That you followed procedure. What happened to you? The line crackled faintly, then steadied. I stayed on the call too long, he said. I believe the system over my instincts. That's what we're trained to do, I said. Exactly, he replied. I trusted the log when it told me nothing was wrong. My eyes flicked back to the screen. The missing 5 minutes glared at me. What happens if I keep answering? I asked. The calls get quieter, he said. Harder to notice. They stop sounding like emergencies. And then, I pressed, then one of them sounds like you, he said. A chill ran through me. That's impossible. That's what I said, he replied. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how empty it was. Karen was on another call now, her voice a low murmur across the space. The rest of the station sat dark and unused. Why can I hear you if the call is over? I asked. Because you never hung up, he said. You just think you did. I watched it end, I said. The system said. The system says a lot of things, he interrupted. It tells you when a call is finished. It tells you when to move on. It doesn't tell you when something stays connected. My chest tightened. Connected to what? I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer. To the part of the job you're not supposed to notice, and he said. Another notification appeared on my screen. System message, audio archive updated. I clicked it without thinking. A new file had appeared, time-stamped at 12:03 a.m. Duration 0 or 1:34. The file name was my employee ID. My hand trembled as I hovered over the play button. Don't, the man said. Not yet. Why not? I asked. Because once you hear it, he replied, you'll remember answering calls you don't remember making. The room seemed to close in around me, the hum of the light suddenly too loud. Is that what happened to you? I asked. He exhaled slowly. That's when I realized I wasn't calling you from outside anymore, he said. I was calling from inside the system. Inside where? I asked. There was a pause, longer than any before. From the gap, he said, the part between when a call ends and when you let it go. My screen flickered for a fraction of a second, just enough to notice. The map refreshed itself. Units blinked on and off. They're going to audit your shift tomorrow, he said suddenly. Why? I asked. Because this is when it starts showing up for other people, he replied. Supervisors, IT. They'll tell you it's a glitch. And it isn't, I asked. He laughed softly. It's a feature, he said. You just weren't supposed to see it. Another call began to ring in the queue, then another. 2 lines lit up at once. I stared at them, my mind racing. What do? I asked. His answer came immediately. Watch the log, he said. Not the calls. What am I looking for? I asked. The moment your name stops meaning you, he replied. That's when you know you're running out of time. The lines kept ringing. 3 now. The room filled with the sound. Are you still there? I asked. There was no response. The transfer channel disconnected without a sound. I was left staring at my screens, the unanswered calls flashing insistently, the new audio file sitting in my archive like a loaded weapon. Somewhere deep in the system, a record existed that said I had already made a choice. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the screen before I finally pressed play. Time behaves strangely when you're waiting for something you don't want to hear. The calls in the queue kept ringing, cycling through tones until the system rerouted them to Karen's station, then to overflow, then to wherever unanswered calls go when no one is fast enough. Somewhere, people were waiting for a voice that wasn't coming. I told myself I would listen to the file quickly, confirm it was corrupted, and move on. That was the lie I needed in order to click the button. The audio began with the familiar hiss of an open line, followed by the soft hum of the dispatch room. My dispatch room, captured from the headset microphone. I recognized the cadence of my own breathing immediately. Too slow, too controlled. The way I sound when I'm trying not to react. Then my voice spoke, calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? I felt a jolt of disorientation, the same sensation you get when you hear your recorded voice played back unexpectedly. The difference was that I didn't remember saying it. The line stayed quiet for a few seconds, then a second voice came through. Male, calm, too calm. I think something's wrong with the line. My chest tightened as the realization settled in. It was the same man, the same call. But this wasn't a recording of what I remembered. It was cleaner, closer, like it had been captured from a different angle. The conversation unfolded the way I recalled it at first, but then it diverged. My voice asked questions I didn't remember asking. The man answered things I hadn't heard before. Details slipped through the cracks of my memory, small at first, then impossible to ignore. At one point, my recorded voice said, "I understand," in a tone I only use when I've already accepted something I can't change. I paused the playback, my hands slick with sweat. The room felt colder now, the hum of the lights sharper. I glanced at the clock. 1:12 a.m. Nearly an hour had passed since the first call. I hadn't noticed. I resumed the audio. The man's voice shifted slightly, closer to the microphone. "You're going to try to forget this," he said. "That's normal." My recorded voice didn't respond right away. When it did, it sounded tired. "What happens if I don't?" There was a pause, heavy and deliberate. "Then you end up where I am," the man said. "And where is that?" my voice asked. The answer came, and this time I was certain I had never heard it before. "On the other side of the transfer." The audio ended abruptly, cutting off mid-breath. The system chimed softly to indicate the file had finished playing. I sat back, my thoughts racing, my mind struggling to reconcile what I had just heard with what I remembered. The recording wasn't a perfect match. It was a version, one that implied there were others. My screen flickered and a new window opened without my input. Transfer history. The list was longer than it should have been. Dozens of entries scrolled past, most of them time-stamped across different nights, different shifts. All of them shared the same destination. Me. My throat tightened. I scrolled further back, my pulse pounding. The earliest entry was dated 3 years ago, months before I'd been hired. The destination field was blank. The source field read unknown. The next entry listed a name I didn't recognize, then another, and another. Each one ended the same way. Transfer completed. I understood then, in a way that settled deep in my bones, that the man hadn't been calling me from outside the system at all. He'd been routed to me, assigned, just like I was assigned to calls every night. The realization made the room feel suddenly very small. I pulled off my headset and stood, my chair rolling back slightly with a soft clatter that echoed too loudly in the quiet. Karen was gone. I hadn't noticed her leave. Her station sat empty, the screen dark. For the first time since I'd started the shift, I felt truly alone. I walked to the supervisor's desk near the back of the room and picked up the desk phone. No dial tone. The line was dead. I tried my cell phone next, no signal. The screen displayed a single bar that vanished as soon as I touched it. The overhead lights flickered, just once, then steadied. My workstation chimed again. Another notification, incoming transfer request. I returned to my chair slowly, every instinct screaming at me to leave, even as I knew I couldn't. The request pulsed on the screen, patient, insistent. I didn't accept it. I sat there staring, my breathing shallow. After a few seconds, the request timed out. The system didn't drop it, it rerouted it to my own extension. The line rang. The sound cut through me like a blade. I lifted the headset with trembling hands and placed it back over my ears. 911, I said automatically, my voice hoarse. The line was quiet. Then I heard something I hadn't expected. My own breathing, delayed by a fraction of a second, echoing back through the headset. "Hello," I said. The echo responded. "Hello?" My heart hammered in my chest. "Who is this?" I asked. There was a pause. Then my voice answered, calm and familiar. "You know who this is." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to rip the headset off. "This isn't real," I said. "It is," the voice replied. "It's just not happening where you think it is." I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" I asked. The voice on the other end sighed. The sound weighted with exhaustion. "I want you to stop pretending this was an accident," it said. "This is how the system balances itself." "Balances what?" I demanded. "The calls that don't end," it replied. "The voices that stay on the line after everyone else has moved on." My skin prickled. "You said I still had time," I said. "That I could listen." "You did listen," the voice said gently. "That's why you're here." "I'm not," I said. "I'm still on my shift." "So was I," it replied. The screens around me began to populate with familiar data. Maps, unit statuses, call queues. Everything looked normal. Too normal. "Look at the clock," the voice said. I glanced up. 12:03 a.m. The time had reset. "That's not possible," I whispered. "It happens every night," the voice said. "You just don't remember it yet." The line crackled softly. "What happens to the people who call?" I asked. There was another pause, longer this time. "They get help," the voice said. "Just not from you." The implications settled heavily in my chest. "And the ones who don't?" I pressed. "They become calls," it replied. "That's how the line stays open." The room hummed around me, the lights steady, the air conditioning whispering softly. "Why me?" I asked. The answer came without hesitation. "Because you never hang up," the voice said. "You stay connected." I felt tears sting my eyes, a mixture of fear and something like grief. "Can I leave?" I asked quietly. The voice was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, it sounded almost kind. "You already did," it said. "You just haven't noticed." The call ended. The system chimed. Status ended. I sat there shaking, staring at the console. A new call rang in the queue, then another. The clock ticked forward to 12:04 a.m. I took a deep breath, adjusted my headset, and answered. 911, what's your emergency?" The line was quiet. Then a man spoke, his voice calm, too calm. "I think something's wrong with the line." As I listened, as the system filled in the caller information automatically, I watched the name field populate. My name appeared, crisp and familiar, exactly where it belonged.